If you've ever gone bird watching, you know the atmosphere. A trail, quiet light, the kind of morning where everyone whispers by instinct, even though there's no real reason to. It's calm, predictable, the safest hobby imaginable. So when I tell you the scariest thing I've ever experienced happened on a bird watching walk with a dozen ordinary people on a familiar trail with no danger anywhere, you'll understand why it still lives in the back of my mind like a bruise. Because nothing supernatural happened. No monster, no hallucination, no shadow figure in the trees. Just a man acting wrong, and a fog thick enough to erase the world. His name was Stephen. Not a best friend, not a stranger. One of those familiar faces you assume you know better than you do. Cheerful, steady, always commenting on birds with the enthusiasm of a dad discovering TikTok. He carried extra granola bars, joked with newcomers, knew how to adjust binoculars for anyone who asked. Comfortable. Safe. But that morning, the fog had rolled in thick and heavy before sunrise. Not the wispy, romantic movie fog. This was dense, wet fabric that swallowed distance and muted sound until everything around you was the same flat gray. Even your own footsteps sounded like they were coming from the wrong direction. When we stepped out of our cars, the boardwalk rail 10 feet ahead was already disappearing. And that's where we saw him. Stephen was standing beside his car, not leaning, not waiting, not stretching, just standing still, one hand resting on the roof, staring into the fog behind the parking lot like it had held some slow-moving shape he was trying to memorize. He didn't turn when we approached. Someone said, "Hey, morning, man." And only then, without looking away, he murmured, "They're early today." We laughed, because what else do you do? Somebody assumed he meant the birds. Somebody else made a joke about owls. He didn't react. His binoculars dangled from his neck, the lenses smeared as if he'd pressed them too hard onto his face earlier. That was the first moment I felt something tighten in my chest. He came with us anyway. We moved onto the boardwalk in a loose line, shoes tapping on wet wood, fog swallowing everything 15 feet away. The lake was invisible. The trees were invisible. Even sound felt smothered. Except for him. He drifted to the front. No one asked him to lead. He just became the silhouette we naturally followed. Shoulders hunched, head twitching around, looking for sounds that none of us heard. Bird watchers point at things. That's normal. But the way he did it wasn't. He'd stop abruptly, raise one finger slowly, and point to an empty patch of fog like he was marking the location of something enormous. "Huh," he muttered at one point. "That one shouldn't be that close to the ground." We stared at nothing. He nodded to himself, as if confirming something none of us understood, and then he kept walking. A few minutes later, he said, almost conversationally, "You hear that flapping?" "No, it's fine. It'll stop soon." No one laughed this time. Someone behind me whispered, "What flapping?" But he didn't answer. He pressed his palm lightly against the rail, as if feeling for vibration. The fog moved with us, not swirling, retreating, like a curtain pulling back at the exact pace that we walked. Eventually, he raised his binoculars again. The fog was so solid he could have been examining a wall, but he leaned forward, focusing intensely. Then, abruptly, his head whipped upward. We all jumped at the movement. It was the first time he'd reacted sharply to anything. A tiny scrape had echoed overhead, maybe a branch shifting, maybe a bird we couldn't see. But the moment it happened, his whole body tensed, like he'd just heard someone shout his name from the sky. No one else heard it clearly, but he had. When he lowered the binoculars, he whispered, "That one's curious about you." He was looking directly at me. I felt my stomach tighten. What did you see? He blinked slowly, like coming back from somewhere far away. Nothing, don't worry. He kept walking. We followed, not because he seemed okay, but because it was easier than stopping. The fog didn't feel dangerous, just wrong. Like the world had shrunk until our group was the only real thing left. Then he stopped again. We passed the dead log already. Twice. Someone shook their head. There's no log on this trail. He stiffened. His jaw twitched. Just keep moving, he murmured. Please, don't say anything. A tremor passed through the group. Something primal. Something like obeying a command you didn't understand. We walked. Every now and then, he muttered more of his strange observations. They're lining up today. That's not good. Don't stand there. You're in its path. Just keep moving. It's matching our pace. Could someone tell them to stop ducking behind us? Try not to react. They notice that. Fog messes with your depth perception, so you're always checking your sides, looking behind you, even if you know there's nothing there. But every time he said something, someone glanced over their shoulder, and the fog swallowed the movement like a mouth swallowing breath. That's when it happened. Our added moment of real human fear. One of the newer men in the group gasped softly. Did something just brush past me? Before any of us could respond, Stephen snapped, "No, keep walking." The man fell silent instantly. His breathing went fast and shallow, but he didn't argue. Stephen didn't look back to check on him. He just walked faster. We hurried to keep up. By then, our group had stopped chatting entirely. No bird names, no trail jokes, no sharing binoculars. Just footsteps and fog and the sound of Stephen muttering to himself like someone navigating a room in the dark. When the trail had finally appeared, a faint, ghostly line in the fog, relief spread quietly through the group. People exhaled, shoulders loosened. Someone said, "Thank God," under their breath. We step off the boardwalk, one by one, onto gravel. I turned to say something to Stephen, but he wasn't there. Not behind me, not ahead of me, not anywhere. He'd been walking in front of me the entire time. We would have seen him step off. We would have heard gravel crunch, but there was nothing. Just fog swallowing the entrance behind us like a curtain closing after a performance. Someone said, "Maybe he went to his car already?" We walked toward the parking lot, expecting to see him rummaging in his trunk or sipping from his thermos. But he wasn't there. His car was exactly where we'd seen it earlier. Driver's door open now. Keys in the ignition tray slot. Coffee in a cup holder, still warm. And on the roof, placed neatly, facing the boardwalk, were his binoculars. Still warm, still smudged, still angled toward the fog we'd just exited. Someone called his name. Someone else circled the car. A third person jogged back toward the trailhead, shouting into the fog. No response. No movement. No silhouette. The ranger arrived an hour later. Then more searchers. They combed the boardwalk. They walked the lake edge. They circled the forest. They scanned the shoreline. No footprints except for ours. They asked for our timeline. We couldn't give one. They asked if we'd seen anything odd. We said yes. They asked us to repeat it. When we did, the ranger's expression tightened. Not disbelief, more like resignation. The look of someone who hears too many things that don't make sense, but still has to write a report. Subject was acting oddly, he wrote. No evidence of foul play. In his car, searchers found something else. A folded map of the boardwalk. He'd highlighted the route in yellow, but crossed out several pieces in thick red pen, as if correcting it, as if the map was wrong. But the boardwalk has one route. No dead log, no double back, no missing sections, no loops before the end. When they dragged the lake, they found nothing. No body, no clothing, no sign he'd left the path. And just like that, the official story became a man walked off into the fog and vanished. Only that's not what happened. Because you don't just lose someone you've been staring at for an hour. You don't misplace a person walking 10 feet ahead of you. Unless he was right about something. For weeks afterward, I had dreams of fog. Dense, soundless, colorless. In every dream, I heard him whisper, "Try not to react. They noticed that." And each time I woke, I felt the same cold certainty. He hadn't been pointing at birds. He'd been pointing at positions. Eye-level spots where people would or could stand. Distances a person might follow from. Places where silhouettes shift when someone steps aside. He kept looking past us, then directly at us, then behind us again. He didn't fear something in the fog. He feared something in our group. Something he thought he recognized. Something he believed was shifting places whenever he blinked. And the last thing he whispered still freezes my blood. "Don't look at the shore. You're not going to like who's standing there." But there was no visible shore. Not from where we were. Just fog on both sides. Unless he wasn't talking about the real trail. Unless he wasn't talking about the real group. Unless he wasn't talking about real people. Which means the real question isn't where he went. It's who we walked out with. Because the fog behind us had closed so completely that none of us could see each other clearly, even when we stood shoulder to shoulder. So what if one of us didn't return? What if a silhouette slipped into place just as we were stepping out? What if one of those shapes he insisted was matching our pace simply blended in? Sometimes I still take morning walks when the weather's humid. Sometimes the fog presses low across the trail and everything looks flat and distant. And sometimes, not always, but often enough, I see a silhouette ahead of me. Not close enough to see clearly, just far enough that I have to trust that it's a person. Usually it keeps walking, but sometimes it stops, as if waiting, as if listening. And when I blink, it's gone.